In the 21st century, jet fighters are multifunctional. Ground attack, air defense, intercepting. They've got all the bases covered. Rewind to World War I, and combat aviation was a lot simpler. No bombs, no rockets, just guns and chaos. There were no rules. No one had fought a war from the air. Pilots learned their craft by trial and error. But then in September 1916, German fighter ace Oswald Belke published the Dicta Belke, a guide for air-to-air combat. His tactics were simple. Number 1, always attack from behind. The enemy can't see you, and he can't shoot back. Number 2, place yourself between the sun and the enemy. This blinds him for a few seconds, and he can't aim accurately.
But the classic dogfight is basically a turning fight to position one aircraft on the tail of the other. When a pilot finds himself with an airplane at his 6 o'clock, as the term goes, he knows he's in very serious trouble at that point.
30 years later, planes were faster and more maneuverable. But Belke's principles still applied to the ballet in the skies.
Before the Second World War, some theorists thought that the era of dogfighting would be impossible because airplanes were moving in excess of 300 miles per hour.
Targeting became a combination of guesswork and basic deflection. This involved firing the guns into the space ahead of the target to allow for the speed of the enemy plane and the speed of the bullets. If a fighter plane did find itself in a tight corner, very often it would perform a split S. The pilot would invert the plane, execute a half loop, and end up flying level in the opposite direction.
The P-51 with altitude would come down into its 6 o'clock position. Usually the 109 would try to pull up and you'd go into a split S, and hopefully you would end up on its tail and be able to shoot it down.
The Mustang could go as tight as you could pull it. Whatever you wanted it to do and you were capable of doing, it would do. We could keep up with the 109. We could outperform it, outturn it, we could outdive it. We could outfly the 109.
3 P-51 groups, the 8th, 9th, and 15th, shot down an incredible 4,950 German planes. But dogfights weren't limited to Europe. In the Pacific, American and Japanese fighters also engaged in fierce air-to-air maneuvers. American pilots would team up in pairs, flying the ingenious Thatch Weave. Named after Lieutenant Commander Jimmy Thatch, 2 planes would fly a parallel course until a Zero latched onto the tail of one of them. They would then bank steeply inward. If the enemy pilot followed his target, it would lead him into a deadly position, where the other member of the team could shoot him down. In the 1950s, the end of the dogfight seemed near, when the first air-to-air missiles became operational. The reason? Why go toe-to-toe with machine guns when you can safely destroy an enemy plane from distance with a missile?